Okay, in this segment, I kind of broke down, rather than the specific filler, I broke down a specific defect, because this is kind of a one you see pretty frequently. One of the things you have to know is that wood, as it dries, predominantly dries out the end grain. And it's very, very common on the end of a piece of wood to have what's called an end grain check, or some of them call seasoning checks, whatever. It's just where the wood has dried out more on the ends. Now, obviously, common sense says you don't want to use this if there's any way possible. You just cut it out. But sometimes you're caught in a situation where something shows up and you've got a crack and you got to fix it. One of the things you do not want to do is just take a wood filler and put in a crack. Depending on the size of the crack, number one, it doesn't structurally do anything. The second thing is again, if it's a very small crack, it's just not going to get down in there. Filling a crack is probably the last thing you want to do. Although in your first reaction is that would be the first thing to do. It doesn't work quite that way. The other thing is I see folks will do, they'll put glue in there and put a clamp across it really tight to try to pull it back together. That also doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is that that crack is the result of stress being released. And when you glue it all back together, all you did is just put the stress back in it. And eventually it's going to crack again. So you got to fill it. You also have to stabilize it. So you kind of want to glue the crack and, to keep it from going further, and you also got to get something in there to fill it. Now, if you look at this one, this is pretty severe here on this side. And on this side, not the case. Well, I mean, it's severe enough. So how would you, now, look right here. Can you see this little edge right here? There's a little teeny crack. And if I take my finger and I push on it, it's right on the edge. That crack will close up to a great deal. Now, this is something I could glue. But that crack's very, very thin. So this is where I'm going to take a CA glue, because it's very, very thin and it'll flow right down in that crack. And I'm going to put it in there and I'm going to put a clamp on it. Do not use an activator. An activator will make it hard and brittle. Just let it dry naturally. Then it will dry clear and good strength. But that's where you would use a thin, because you want it to flow into that crack. In the case right here where we've got these big checks, and everybody knows a check's fancy word for crack. I ain't talking about, I'm talking about a crack in wood. If I've got a big old crack like that, there's two candidates to repair this. The first one is a CA glue or one of the pour-on epoxies. Now, the reason for the pour-on, now you can use a 5-minute epoxy or something like that. But one of the things you have to, again, you have to know when you're using an epoxy, when you mix it, it gets air in, it's going to be cloudy. It's not going to be clear. The same thing with using an activator on a CA glue. So to handle this, what I would do, but see, this would be the bottom of my board. So I want to get a bottom in it quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray some activator right in that crack. Then working very quickly, I'm going to get some tape on here. Really nice and tight so that it don't run through. Then this would be a good candidate. I could probably get by with a medium viscosity on this, but I'm going to go with the thin because my crack on top's thin, and that's going to be my access point. And all I'm going to do is start running it in there. and I'm just going to flow it in until it's full. Now I'm going to let this set up a little bit, but the other thing I can do, and it's already drained down further in there, I can see on the bottom of the tape it's already got there. I don't think I have enough here to really run out just yet. I've got my sawdust right here. My sanding dust is right there. That's what I'm going to use as a filler. But I want to make sure I got a bottom in here. Just about. See the bottom? See in here where it's all setting up? A little bit more activator. Now this I'm going to activate because I don't care. I just want it full. And it is. Now the other thing, a little bit more. See, the object of the game here is I don't want to activate what's going to be my show surface because I don't want to cloud it. And there's fissures down inside of here, and this stuff's going to flow right into it and fill them. All right, I'm in there. If you look right here, you see where it filled this, but you can see how cloudy it is, and you see where that's running out right there and how clear it is. That's what I'm telling you. The activator is going to cloud that surface. Now I'm drawing my attention back to my main surface here. And as you can see, I'm getting full. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of, got to make sure I'm full. See, it's still taking it. That tells me there could be a fissure or something running back in here that is just not letting it fill. There it goes. It's filling. Now, once I get to that point, I can take some sanding dust and I can sprinkle in it. Now this is going to cost you a piece of sandpaper, but I'm going to show you something. Taking a piece of sandpaper, you can see right here, what I'm doing is I'm mixing the sanding dust and the CA glue, and you can see this has already gotten hard, but it makes a really good filler. It just trashes your sandpaper pretty quick. So that's the reason we always keep some old laying around in case we run into something like this. All right, I'm getting a paste. See the paste I made? I'm gonna have to work it in there really quick. I'm gonna have to get some new sandpaper. This is wore out. And if you look at me, look at my eyes. See the water? You want to wear a mask and you want to wear something because the fumes from that CA glue can get pretty potent on you. But they will make a nice fill. Huh? It said he could smell it over there. Now again, this little guy right here on the edge. Whoops. All I'm going to do is put a little CA glue on it. Thin. Now the other thing I should have used there, I used on the top of that, I should have used a medium. And you can see right now where it's running out the back. Then I put a clamp on it, let it dry. But again, there's just minor pressure here. Now this I can activate because I'm going to be sanding it right off. I'm not trying to fill. I'm just trying to glue it back. All right, you can see how quickly that crack right there loaded up my sandpaper. That was an old wore out piece of 180. So I'm going to get me another wore out piece of 120. Now in this case, I'm kind of doing it a little different. You can see where the first fill, the white, is the sanding dust we just created, and the dark, that's the part's already been filled with the CA glue. There's something you have to remember. The reason this check is darker is because of that sanding dust. And intermixing with the CA glue, it's got a finish on it. The CA is acting as a finish. And when that happens, it's going to automatically make it darker. That's an issue sometimes using sanding dust, is that it can get darker than you want. Now again, an alternative to this would have been to use some epoxy. Or we could have used a couple layers of CA glue as our main bonding surface to get down in there and to solidify the thing. Then we could have come back with a little bit of either an epoxy stick, or then we could have used some of the wood filler. But because it's got a coating of CA glue in there, that's a very hard surface. You're going to want to take a little piece of sandpaper, a knife or something, and scratch in there, then use your wood filler. That gives that some tooth, something to bond to. You know, a good little thing for something like that is a little very thin file, something like a fingernail file emery board, something you can clean in there and give it some bite. That's used working with an end check. Now I'm going to show you one last trick on an end grain. We'll be right back. One of my favorite tricks, if I have to, you see the crack? What I did is I just ran into it and tracked it with a bandsaw. Then I made a little veneer. I would put wood glue in there, and I'm going to drive the piece of veneer up into it, sand it off, and I've got a good repair. There's another way. Take you a piece of thin material like this and make a knife edge on it, a wedge, like a knife blade. And you put your glue and whatever in there, and you can kind of flex this around a little bit. This ain't a mallet, but it'll do. And you drive it down in, let the glue dry. Now the reason you want to let the glue dry before you break this off is because if you don't, a lot of times it'll break below the surface. But I'm just gonna, and see, this is now glued into that crack. And now I have wood on wood to take care of the defect. Works pretty nice. End grain checks. A couple ways to handle them.